I never thought my life would take such a turn. At 40 years old, a man expects stability. By this age, I believed I had built the kind of life most people would respect. A good home, a car, a steady income, and above all, a wife I trusted more than anyone in the world. If someone had told me a few years ago that one day I would be standing on the edge of heartbreak, betrayed in the most unimaginable way, I would have laughed it off. I always believed loyalty was the foundation of love. But sometimes life shows you that the person you trusted most can also be the one who breaks you beyond repair. I grew up in a small American town where everyone knew each other. My parents raised me with simple values: work hard, be honest, and never betray the ones you love. My father was a strict man, but his love was real. My mother, gentle and patient, always reminded me that family was the only treasure that mattered. I carried those lessons with me throughout my life. When I met the woman who became my wife, I thought I had finally found the person who shared those same values. She was beautiful, caring, and full of life. I saw in her eyes a future that felt safe. We spent years together, building memories brick by brick. There were nights we stayed up talking about our dreams, mornings we laughed over breakfast, and afternoons when even silence between us felt comforting. I worked hard, not for myself, but to give her everything she wanted. I thought love meant sacrifice, and I was ready to give every piece of myself to make her happy. For me, marriage wasn't just a bond, it was a promise carved in stone. But promises, I learned, can be broken in the quietest, most secret ways. It all started on an ordinary morning, the kind you don't expect to become unforgettable. She told me she had a hospital checkup. Her words were calm, casual, like it was just another day. She said she would take the car with our driver, as usual, and return after her appointment. I nodded, trusting her completely, because why wouldn't I? She had always been the center of my world, and I never questioned her words. That was my mistake. Our driver was a loyal man. He had been with us for years and had become more like family than an employee. That day, he drove her out of the society gate, like he always did. But what happened next was something I never expected. A few minutes later, the driver returned with the car, without my wife. Confused, I asked him what had happened. That's when his voice shook as he told me the truth. She had asked him to turn the car back and go home. She told him she would continue on her own. And then, right before his eyes, she climbed onto another man's motorcycle. Not just any man, but her secret lover. The words hit me like thunder. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt heavy, my mind frozen. I wanted to deny it, to believe the driver had misunderstood, but his eyes told me he was speaking the truth. He didn't want to break me, but he knew I deserved to know. That single moment cracked the foundation of everything I had built my life upon. As I stood there staring at the empty space where she should have been, I felt like the ground beneath my feet had disappeared. The woman I had loved, the woman I had protected, the woman I had trusted with my entire heart, had chosen another man over me. Not in secret shadows far away, but right there in the open, with no fear of being caught. She sent back her own car, her own driver, just to ride away with him. That picture burned into my mind like a scar that will never fade. I tried to hold myself together, but inside I was collapsing. How could the woman who once held my hand so tightly now be holding on to another man? How could the one who promised to stand by me in sickness and in health, in loyalty and in love, now betray me with such ease? I had no answers, only silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, hearing the driver's words echo in my head again and again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her on that bike, her arms wrapped around another man. My chest burned as if someone had lit a fire inside me. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some mistake, but deep down, I knew the truth. I thought about the little things that had changed over the past few months. She used to laugh at my jokes, but lately her smile felt forced. She used to ask me how my day was, but recently she hardly cared. Her phone was always in her hand, but the screen was always turned away from me. I had noticed these things, but I told myself not to overthink. I trusted her too much. I thought love was stronger than doubt. Now I realized that my blind trust had only made it easier for her to lie. I remembered the early years of our marriage, when she looked at me with eyes full of warmth. On our honeymoon, she held my hand so tightly, as if letting go would mean losing everything. I remembered the nights when we planned our future together, promising never to hurt each other. Those promises played in my mind like old songs, but now they only cut me deeper. When she came home late that night, I watched her closely. She walked in as if nothing had happened, carrying a small bag in her hand, pretending she had just come back from the hospital. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, but even that kiss felt empty. My heart wanted to scream, to ask her where she had really been, but my lips stayed silent. I wasn't ready to face the storm. I wanted to see how long she would keep lying to me. I kept my pain hidden, but inside I was breaking. Every word she spoke felt like poison. Every smile felt like a mask. I wanted to believe the woman I loved was still somewhere inside her, but all I could see was a stranger. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face seemed older, heavier. My eyes carried sleepless nights. I wondered if people could see the betrayal written across my forehead. I wondered if the neighbors, the friends, even the driver's family already knew what I had only just discovered. The thought of being pitied made me sick. I had always carried myself as a strong man, but now I felt weak, smaller than I had ever felt before. As days passed, I watched her more closely. She thought I was blind, but my eyes were wide open now. Her excuses became more frequent: doctor's appointments, visits to friends, shopping trips. Each time she left the house, my heart pounded with suspicion. I imagined her climbing on that bike again, holding him the way she once held me. The pain grew heavier, crushing me slowly. Yet I stayed silent. Why? Maybe because I still loved her. Maybe because I was afraid of losing her completely. Maybe because I couldn't imagine my life without the woman I had built it around. Love makes fools of us all, and I was no exception. But silence does not heal wounds. It only makes them deeper. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm, but the world outside looked calm. No one could see the hurricane that was tearing me apart from within. My wife moved around the house like nothing had changed. She cooked meals, she laughed at the television, she spoke to me in the same soft voice she always had. To an outsider, we were still a happy couple, but I knew. I knew the truth that she carried inside her, the secret she thought I would never discover. Every time she picked up her phone, my chest tightened. She would tilt the screen away, her fingers moving quickly, her lips curving into a smile that was no longer for me. That smile used to be my sunlight. Now it was a dagger. She thought I wasn't noticing, but my eyes had become sharper than ever. I noticed everything: the way she dressed a little more carefully before going out, the perfume she sprayed even for short errands, the nervous way she avoided my gaze whenever I asked too many questions. I tried to go about my daily life, but nothing felt the same. At work, my colleagues laughed, shared stories, and planned their weekends. I sat quietly, pretending to listen, but my mind was always somewhere else. I kept seeing her on that motorcycle, holding him tightly, as if he was her world. I wondered what she told him. Did she tell him she loved him? Did she laugh with him the way she once laughed with me? Did she give him the same promises she once whispered in my ear at night? These thoughts haunted me until I could hardly breathe. At night, when she lay beside me in bed, I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. She turned her back to me more often now, her body cold and distant. I reached out once, hoping to feel some warmth, but she shifted away. That small movement broke me more than any loud confession could have. She didn't have to say the words. Her silence screamed louder than anything. But still, I couldn't confront her. My heart was torn between rage and love. One part of me wanted to grab her by the shoulders and demand the truth. The other part wanted to hold on to the illusion, even if it was killing me. I told myself maybe this was a phase. Maybe she would come back to me if I stayed patient. But each day, her distance grew and my hope shrank. I began remembering the early days of our marriage more often. I remembered the first time I saw her. She was standing at a bookstore, holding a novel in her hands, her hair falling over her face. I had walked up to her, nervous but determined, and asked if she believed in love at first sight. She laughed then, the kind of laugh that makes your heart race, and said, "Maybe. Why don't you prove it?" That moment had been the start of everything. I spent years trying to prove my love, and I thought I had succeeded. I gave her my heart, my time, my loyalty. I gave her everything a man could give. And now, years later, she was giving her love to someone else. I remembered the day we moved into our house. We had no furniture yet, just boxes stacked in the corner. We sat on the floor, eating pizza, dreaming about the life we would build. She had leaned against me and said, "This will always be our safe place." Now, those walls felt like a prison. Every room echoed with memories that stabbed me with every step I took. Sometimes I wanted to ask the driver more details. I wanted to know who the man was, what he looked like, how long this had been going on. But I stopped myself. I was too afraid of the answers. Knowing more would only deepen the wound, and I was already bleeding inside. I began noticing how easily she lied. One evening, she said she was going to visit a friend. She dressed beautifully, too beautifully for a simple visit. I watched her carefully as she left, my heart screaming inside. Hours later, she returned. Her hair slightly messy, her smile too wide. She looked like a woman who had lived another life while I sat at home waiting. She kissed me on the forehead and asked if I had eaten dinner. I nodded, but inside I wanted to shout, "Don't touch me with the same lips that touched him." But I stayed quiet, swallowing my anger, drowning in silence. My friends sometimes invited me out, but I refused. I didn't have the energy to pretend anymore. I didn't want to smile when my heart was burning. I didn't want to sit in a bar, hearing other men laugh about their wives, when mine was betraying me in secret. I became more and more isolated, carrying my pain alone. Even my family noticed the change in me. My mother asked if I was okay, but I lied, just as my wife lied to me. I told her I was fine, just tired. How could I explain the truth without breaking down? The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, listening to her breathe beside me. I would wonder if she was dreaming of him. I would imagine them together, her arms wrapped around him, her lips whispering things she never whispered to me anymore. Those images drove me insane. Sometimes I wanted to shake her awake and scream, "Why him? Why not me?" But instead, I turned to the other side and cried silently into my pillow. Each day I was losing myself. I wasn't just losing a wife, I was losing my faith in love, in trust, in life itself. The man I used to be, the confident, hopeful, loving man, was disappearing. In his place stood a broken version of me, one who doubted everything, one who no longer believed in promises. But still, I waited. I waited for the right moment to confront her, the right words to say. I didn't know how it would end. Would she confess? Would she deny? Would she leave me for him? The uncertainty was killing me more than the truth itself. Days turned into weeks, and the weight on my chest didn't ease. Every morning I woke hoping that maybe it had all been a misunderstanding, a nightmare I could shake off with a cup of coffee and a deep breath. But reality never let me forget. Her laughter in the kitchen, her casual movements around the house, and the faint scent of another man clinging to her clothes, all reminded me that she had chosen someone else. Each reminder was like a hammer striking my heart. I started paying attention to everything she did, almost obsessively. The way she walked down the hallway, the way she held her phone, the small glances she gave whenever she thought I wasn't looking. I became a silent observer in my own home, watching a woman I loved more than life itself slowly slip away. There were moments when I wanted to confront her right then and there, to demand the truth, but fear and love kept me frozen. I wanted to know everything, yet I feared that knowing would destroy me completely. One evening, the house was quiet. She had gone out to meet a friend, or so she said, and I stayed behind, pacing the living room. My thoughts kept returning to the driver's words, how she had sent the car back, how she had climbed onto that bike, how she had smiled at him. I imagined them riding together, laughing, sharing secrets that were once mine. My stomach twisted, my hands shook, and my heart pounded so violently that I feared it might burst. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I needed answers. When she returned, it was late. The faint glow of streetlights filtered through the curtains, casting shadows across the room. She stepped inside, her hair slightly messy, her eyes flickering with a hint of nervousness, something I'd never seen before. I stood still, my body tense, my jaw clenched. I didn't speak immediately. I let the silence stretch, hoping she would break it herself. But she didn't. I walked toward her slowly, each step deliberate, like I was trying to prepare myself for the truth I might hear. My heart was a storm inside my chest, and my mind was a battlefield of rage and heartbreak. I stopped in front of her and looked into her eyes. For the first time, she didn't meet my gaze. She avoided it, glancing anywhere but at me. That moment told me everything I needed to know. "I know," I said quietly, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay calm. She flinched, as if the words had struck her. "I know about him. I know what you did the other day, and I know it's not the first time." Her eyes widened, then darted to the floor. She opened her mouth, probably to deny it, to lie, but no words came out. I could see the truth in her silence. That silent admission hurt more than anything else. My chest ached, my throat burned, and my mind screamed in pain. "Why?" I whispered, barely able to speak. "Why would you do this to me? After everything we built, after everything we promised each other?" She finally looked up, and I saw her eyes, not the warm, loving eyes I had married, but something colder, something distant. I don't know," she said softly, almost like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "I didn't mean to hurt you." The words hit me like fire. How could someone who had chosen another man still claim she didn't mean to hurt me? The betrayal was deliberate, calculated, and yet here she was, asking me to forgive her without remorse. My mind raced, filled with the memories of our love, of our life together, and the sharp, unbearable reality that all of it had been a lie in her mind. I felt a rage I had never known, but alongside it was sorrow, deep, endless sorrow. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break everything around me, but I also wanted to understand, to hear from her why the woman I loved had abandoned me for someone else. I wanted to hold on to the hope that this was a mistake, a phase, something that could be fixed. But I knew, deep down, that the hope was gone. She stepped closer, hesitantly, as if trying to reach me, but I recoiled. I had been wounded too deeply to accept her touch. "Don't," I said, my voice firmer now. "Don't come near me. You need to tell me the truth. Not excuses, not lies, just the truth." For a long moment we stood there in silence, the tension between us thick enough to suffocate. Then she began to speak, her voice trembling, almost breaking. She told me about the man, about their meetings, about the little moments I had never noticed. Every word she spoke felt like a knife. I listened, my body frozen, my soul shattering. Each revelation was worse than the last. She had hidden him in plain sight, and every small lie had been part of a carefully constructed facade. By the end of her confession, I was exhausted. My mind had tried to prepare me for betrayal, but no amount of preparation could have lessened the pain. I felt hollow, empty, as if everything that had once defined me had been stripped away. The woman I loved, the woman I had trusted with every part of my heart, had chosen someone else, and I had to live with that truth. That night, I slept alone on the couch. She went to bed, probably hoping we could pretend the conversation hadn't happened, but I couldn't. I couldn't forget. I couldn't forgive, not yet, maybe never. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my shattered life pressing down on me. For the first time in my life, I understood that love could hurt more than anything else. It could destroy you from the inside, leave scars that never fully healed, and make you question everything you thought you knew about life. The days after the confrontation felt like walking through fog. I moved through the house, but it no longer felt like home. Every corner reminded me of her presence. Every shadow whispered her betrayal. I tried to act normal, to go about my daily life, but it was impossible. Eating meals felt hollow, working felt meaningless, and even the sound of my own voice seemed foreign. I realized that life had split into two halves, before the betrayal and after it. And the after was a world I didn't recognize. I spent hours alone, thinking about the past. I remembered the moments when she had laughed at my jokes, when she had held my hand in the car, when she had rested her head on my chest at night. Those memories were bittersweet now, like beautiful photographs stained with ink. I wondered if she ever thought of those moments, or if they were erased from her mind the moment she chose someone else. The driver became my silent ally. He had delivered the truth, and now he offered quiet support. Sometimes he would check in on me, asking if I needed anything, without pressing me for details. I trusted him because he had always been honest with me, and his presence was a small comfort in a world that felt unbearably cruel. He reminded me that not everyone in my life was betraying me, that some people still cared. At work, I struggled. My concentration faltered, and I made mistakes that were unusual for me. Colleagues noticed, but I smiled and brushed it off, hiding the storm that raged inside. I couldn't tell anyone the truth. It was too personal, too humiliating. The shame of betrayal kept me silent, but the pain was always there, like a constant dull ache. I began questioning everything about our marriage. Had I missed the signs? Was it something I did or didn't do that pushed her away? I replayed every conversation, every disagreement, every small moment of tension, but nothing made sense. I had loved her with everything I had, and still it had not been enough. The realization left me hollow. Sometimes I would stare at the ceiling for hours, feeling as if life itself had abandoned me. Yet, even in the depths of despair, I found a strange clarity. I realized that my pain, as intense as it was also a form of awakening. I could no longer pretend, could no longer live in a world of illusions. The truth, no matter how painful, had stripped away the lies and left me with myself. And I had to rebuild. I started small. I took long walks, letting the cold air clear my mind. I revisited old hobbies I had neglected. Reading, writing, even woodworking. Each small act reminded me that I still existed, that I was still capable of feeling joy, even if it was buried under layers of hurt. I learned to find strength in solitude, to listen to my own thoughts without being crushed by them. Slowly, I began to set boundaries with her. I stopped pretending everything was fine. I no longer asked where she was going, no longer smiled when she tried to kiss me lightly on the cheek. I built a wall between us, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I had to protect myself from further pain. And in that act of self-preservation, I found a sense of power I had never known. Friends and family became my lifeline. My mother would call every evening, her voice warm and comforting. My father, though he lived far away, sent messages of support, reminding me that life, though unfair at times, still had meaning. I leaned on them, allowing their love to fill the void she had left behind. Their presence reminded me that I was not alone, that I could survive even this heartbreak. Months passed. The pain did not disappear. It never truly would, but it became manageable. I could talk about it without collapsing, think about it without wanting to scream. I started dreaming about the future again, imagining a life that was mine, unshackled from the betrayal that had defined the past. I realized that love could hurt, yes, but it could also teach. It had taught me resilience, self-worth, and the importance of trusting my own instincts. One evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset, I felt a strange sense of peace. The house was quiet, the world was still, and for the first time in months, I felt the possibility of hope. I knew that my life would never be the same as it was before, but I also knew that I had the strength to move forward. I had survived the worst betrayal a man could face, and in doing so, I had discovered a deeper version of myself, a version that could endure, grow, and one day, perhaps, love again. Her presence in my life would always be a shadow, a memory that stung, but I had learned to live alongside it, to honor the pain without letting it consume me. I had rebuilt my life, brick by brick, memory by memory, until I was strong enough to face the world again. And in that strength, I found something even more precious than love, the unshakable knowledge that I could survive, no matter what. Life after her betrayal was like learning to walk in a storm. The first few months were the hardest. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, replaying her face on that bike, the image of her leaving me behind. Sometimes I would imagine confronting her again, screaming every hurtful word I had kept bottled up. But I stopped myself. I realized that her answers would never heal the wound. The only thing that could restore me was time and action, my own actions. I started paying attention to myself in ways I never had before. I cut back on work distractions and focused on small routines that reminded me I was still alive. Mornings became sacred. I would wake early, make myself strong coffee, and sit on the porch while the world around me slowly woke. I listened to birds, felt the breeze, and allowed myself to breathe without the suffocating weight of her presence. For the first time in months, I felt a small sense of freedom. I revisited old friends I had lost touch with during the busyness of marriage. Dinner with them, laughter over small jokes, casual conversations. These moments reminded me that the world still existed outside my pain. They didn't know everything, and I didn't tell them. but I didn't need to. Their company was enough to heal some of the loneliness I had carried. I also reconnected with my hobbies. Woodworking became a form of therapy. Carving small pieces of furniture, sanding and polishing, created a rhythm that mirrored my recovery. Each smooth surface, each finished piece, felt like a small victory. Slowly, I was reconstructing more than furniture. I was reconstructing myself. There were moments when the grief would return with a vengeance. A song on the radio, a familiar scent, or even the sight of a motorcycle would send me spiraling into memories of her betrayal. I would sit in silence, letting the pain wash over me, refusing to fight it. I realized that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to live with the memory without letting it destroy me. I thought often about the man she had chosen. Anger flared at times, but I learned to channel it into something constructive. I didn't want to dwell on hatred. It would only poison me further. Instead, I focused on myself, my future, and the things I could control. The anger became fuel for my self-growth. I began to redefine what love meant for me. I realized that love should never require giving up your own self-respect. I had given her everything, and it wasn't returned. That was not my failure, it was hers. Understanding this was liberating. It freed me from guilt, from regret, and allowed me to start trusting myself again. Slowly, my interactions with her changed. I no longer waited for her to come back emotionally. I treated her with politeness, but without attachment. The tension in the house eased slightly because I no longer relied on her for my happiness. I found that my presence alone could be a form of strength, a quiet assertion that even betrayal could not break me entirely. I also began thinking about the future. Not a future with her, but a future for me. I wanted to travel again, to see places I had only dreamed of. I wanted to reconnect with parts of my life that had been dormant for years. Books I had shelved, friends I hadn't called, hobbies I had abandoned. I started making lists, small plans at first, and then bigger ones. Each plan felt like a declaration that life could still be beautiful, even after heartbreak. Over time, I found a rhythm. Pain still existed, but it no longer ruled me. Memories of betrayal were no longer chains, they were lessons. I had learned to recognize the difference between love and illusion, loyalty and deception. I had learned that true strength is not in holding on to someone else, but in holding on to yourself. Evenings became my time of reflection. I would sit in the quiet, sipping tea, letting thoughts flow without judgment. I thought about my past self, the man who had trusted blindly, and I forgave him. He had loved fully and sincerely. He had been brave in his own way. And now, the man I had become was stronger, wiser, and unbreakable in a way I could not have imagined before. Life had changed, and so had I. The betrayal that once seemed like the end of the world had become a crucible, forging me into someone capable of endurance, insight, and self-respect. I realized that happiness no longer depended on her or anyone else. It depended on me, and that knowledge, as simple as it seemed, was the greatest gift I could ever have received from heartbreak. As months passed, life slowly regained a sense of normalcy, though it was a new normal, one that I had to learn from scratch. I found myself taking long drives alone, just to feel the wind, to escape the confines of the house that held so many memories of her betrayal. At first, the roads were filled with reminders of what I had lost, but gradually, the open highways became a place of reflection and clarity. I would drive for hours, thinking about the past, but also imagining a future where I could be whole again. Work became a refuge. I threw myself into projects with more dedication than ever before, not to escape, but to remind myself that I was still capable of achievement. My colleagues noticed a change, not in the quality of my work, which had always been high, but in my demeanor. I was calmer, more deliberate, less dependent on others for validation. I realized that in losing her, I had rediscovered my own strength. I also began reconnecting with my family in ways I hadn't before. Weekend visits to my parents' house became sacred rituals. My mother, perceptive as ever, would make me sit for hours and talk, letting me pour out thoughts I didn't even fully understand. My father, though stoic, offered advice in his quiet way, reminding me that life would always challenge us, but resilience was what made a man. I clung to their support, and through them, I began to find myself again. One afternoon, I stumbled across an old journal I had kept during the early years of our marriage. Flipping through the pages, I saw my younger self, so full of hope and love, writing about dreams of a life together. The memories were bittersweet. I remembered the nights we spent talking about children, future trips, and the little things that seemed so important then. I cried as I read the words, not just for her betrayal, but for the innocence and trust that had been stolen from me. Yet amid the tears, I also felt gratitude. Those memories reminded me that I had loved fully, that I had been capable of devotion, and that the love I gave was never wasted, even if it was unreturned. Slowly, I began to allow myself moments of joy again. I visited local parks, sat by the river, and watched sunsets without the shadow of her betrayal looming over me. I started reading novels I had once loved, and even discovered new authors who inspired me. Music became a companion. Melodies that once felt ordinary now carried layers of emotion that resonated with my journey. Each small pleasure felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul that had been lost. I also began writing again, pouring my thoughts into long, reflective essays that eventually turned into a journal of my recovery. Writing became a way to process the pain, to understand the complexity of human relationships, and to articulate the lessons I was learning about trust, love, and resilience. Every sentence I wrote reminded me that I was alive, that my voice still mattered, and that I could shape my own narrative, no longer defined by betrayal. Relationships with others changed as well. I became more cautious, more observant, and less willing to take trust for granted. But this caution was not born of bitterness. It was born of wisdom. I learned to recognize red flags, to understand the difference between love and infatuation, and to value honesty above all else. While I had been hurt deeply, I refused to let it make me cynical. Instead, I let it make me more discerning, more aware of the true meaning of commitment. Months turned into a year, and the house that once echoed with the pain of betrayal now felt quieter, safer. I had learned to share the space with the memories without being haunted by them. I began to imagine a future for myself that did not depend on her presence, a future where I could thrive independently. I started planning trips I had always wanted to take, thinking about hobbies I had abandoned, and even considering small acts of kindness that could reconnect me with the world around me. One day, I walked past the driveway and saw her car parked outside. My heart beat faster, a familiar pang of old emotions rising. But instead of fear or anger, I felt something unexpected, calm. I had reached a point where her presence no longer dictated my emotions. I could acknowledge her existence without being consumed by it. That was freedom. That was the first real step in reclaiming my life. I realized that healing was not a straight path. Some days, memories of betrayal still struck with sharp intensity, but I had learned to face them without collapsing. I had learned that pain is not a permanent state, but a teacher. It had taught me resilience, the importance of self-respect, and the power of moving forward. As the months turned into years, I began to see the world with new eyes. The betrayal that had once defined me no longer controlled me. Instead, it became the catalyst for a life I had never imagined. I started traveling again, first to nearby towns, then to cities I had always wanted to explore. Each journey was a small victory over the past, a statement to myself that I was still alive, still capable of experiencing wonder and joy. I remember walking through a crowded street in New Orleans one afternoon, the sounds of jazz spilling from open windows and street corners. The air was alive with music, with life, with possibilities. For a moment, I felt completely free. I thought about her, as I sometimes still did, but the thought no longer had the power to shatter me. I had survived her betrayal, and now I was walking through life unbroken. That realization, small as it seemed, filled me with strength. I also began to reconnect with old passions I had neglected for years. Writing, which had once been a private refuge, became a form of expression and even purpose. I started journaling daily, recording not just my thoughts and reflections, but also stories from my life, lessons I had learned, and insights I had gained from heartbreak. Writing became a way to process the past while creating a vision for the future. Each page reminded me that my voice mattered, that my experiences had value, and that I could transform pain into meaning. Friendships deepened. People who had been distant during my struggles now became pillars of support. I realized how important it was to cultivate relationships built on trust and mutual respect. I spent time with friends who made me laugh, who challenged me, who reminded me of the joys of life beyond heartbreak. Slowly, I rebuilt a social world that was richer and more nurturing than the one I had known before. I also focused on health, both physical and emotional. Mornings began with long runs or walks, the rhythm of my feet on the pavement helping me find balance in my mind. I learned to meditate, to breathe deeply, to let go of the anger and bitterness that had threatened to consume me. Every small act of care for myself became a declaration that I mattered, that my life had value independent of anyone else. Love, as I had once known it, still lingered in memory, but I began to understand it differently. I realized that true love was not about possession or control, but about respect, honesty, and mutual growth. The betrayal had taught me painful lessons, but it had also clarified what I truly needed from a partner and what I deserved. I no longer sought love from someone who could deceive me. Instead, I focused on cultivating love for myself, a love that was steadfast, unwavering, and immune to betrayal. During this period, I even began to imagine new possibilities for romantic connection, not out of desperation, but out of hope. I realized that my heart, though wounded, was capable of feeling again, but I would approach it with caution, with awareness, and with the wisdom born of experience. I understood that I could never go back to naive trust, but I could open myself to genuine connection, built on honesty and respect. The house, once heavy with memories of betrayal, gradually became a sanctuary again. I rearranged rooms, painted walls, and filled the space with objects that reminded me of growth and renewal. Each change was symbolic, a way of reclaiming the life she had tried to overshadow with deceit. I felt a deep sense of ownership over my own world, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I thought about the journey I had endured, from blind trust to betrayal, to heartbreak, and finally, to recovery. The pain had been intense, unrelenting, and at times almost unbearable. But it had also been transformative. I had learned to trust myself, to value my own worth, and to find meaning in life even after devastation. By this point, I realized that I had truly come full circle. The man I had been, the one who relied entirely on another for happiness, was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. I had survived the ultimate test of trust and love, and I had emerged with my dignity intact. I had learned that life could hurt, but it could also heal. Pain could teach, and betrayal could awaken a strength I had never known existed. And though the memories of her betrayal would never fully fade, they no longer held power over me. I could think of her without rage, without tears, without the ache that had once been constant. I had transformed the pain into clarity, the heartbreak into self-respect, and the loss into freedom. I had built a life that was mine again, a life filled with hope, purpose, and the quiet joy of rediscovery. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been a turning point, a harsh, unforgiving teacher that ultimately guided me toward a deeper understanding of love, resilience, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Over time, I noticed subtle shifts in myself that I hadn't seen before. I smiled more often, not the forced smiles I had used to hide my pain, but genuine smiles that reflected small moments of contentment. I laughed, sometimes at trivial things, sometimes at memories of the past that no longer carried the same sting. I began to feel a lightness I hadn't felt in years, a sense that the weight of betrayal was lifting, replaced by awareness, gratitude, and self-respect. I took up photography, capturing sunsets, streets, people, and quiet moments in nature. Each picture became a reminder that the world was vast, beautiful, and full of stories beyond my own. Through the lens, I discovered the joy of observing life rather than being consumed by it. I would photograph children playing in the park, couples walking hand in hand, strangers laughing at the market, and I felt a quiet hope that love still existed in the world, even if I had been wounded by it. I also began volunteering at a local community center. Helping others gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't realized I needed. There was healing in giving, healing in connecting with people who face their own struggles, and in witnessing resilience in lives so different from mine, yet so similar in essence. It reminded me that pain is universal, and that survival, strength, and growth are available to anyone willing to embrace them. Occasionally I would think about her, my ex-wife, but these thoughts no longer carried the intense anguish of before. I remembered her betrayal, yes, but I also remembered the love we had shared, the lessons learned, the joy experienced, and the truth that not all love lasts forever. I forgave her in my heart, not for her sake, but for mine. Forgiveness freed me from the chains of bitterness, allowing me to move forward without the heavy burden of anger. I reconnected with old friends in ways that felt profound. I traveled with them, shared meals, stories, and laughter. For the first time, I realized that relationships built on honesty and mutual respect are invaluable. These friends reminded me that trust can exist, that connection can thrive, and that life offers opportunities to rebuild, even after devastation. Over time, I began to explore the possibility of new love. Not in haste, not in desperation, but with patience, awareness, and hope. I wanted to love again, fully, wisely, and with the lessons of the past guiding me. The idea of vulnerability no longer terrified me because I understood that love is not about avoiding pain. It's about embracing connection, knowing the risks, and being brave enough to feel again. I also dedicated time to introspection. I wrote long reflections about life, love, trust, and resilience. These writings became a map of my transformation, from heartbreak to self-discovery, from betrayal to wisdom, from loss to hope. I realized that my experiences, no matter how painful, had shaped me into a man who could endure, adapt, and thrive. My story was no longer defined by her actions, but by my response, my strength, and my capacity to grow. I traveled to places I had always dreamed of, small towns, bustling cities, mountains, and rivers. Each journey became a testament to my survival and a celebration of life itself. In Italy, I wandered through ancient streets, marveling at history and beauty, feeling alive in a way I hadn't since before the betrayal. In New York, I watched the skyline light up at dusk, imagining the countless lives intersecting in ways I would never fully understand, yet feeling grateful to be part of it. As the years went by, I began to understand that healing is not a linear path. There were days of nostalgia, of sadness, even fleeting pangs of regret. But these moments became gentle reminders of my journey, of the lessons learned, and of the strength I had cultivated. I embraced them without fear, knowing they were part of the human experience. Eventually, I reached a place of quiet closure. I had faced the betrayal, endured the heartbreak, rebuilt my life, and discovered a resilience I had never imagined. I had learned that love, while powerful, can be imperfect. Trust, while fragile, can be rebuilt. And life, while unpredictable, offers endless opportunities for growth. I no longer defined myself by her choices, by the pain she caused, or by the love that had faltered. I defined myself by my courage, my growth, and my ability to move forward with integrity. Sitting one evening by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had survived what I once thought would destroy me. I had rebuilt a life of meaning, joy, and purpose. The betrayal that had once consumed me was now a distant memory, a lesson rather than a wound. I realized that I was no longer the same man who had trusted blindly, no longer the man defined by loss and pain. I was stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life had to offer. And in that moment, I understood the truth that had always been there, waiting for me to discover. Happiness, love, and fulfillment do not depend on another person's choices. They depend on the courage to face life honestly, to honor one's own worth, and to continue forward, no matter the wounds endured. I had been broken, but I had also been reborn. And in that rebirth, I had found the freedom, strength, and peace I had been seeking all along. After reaching a sense of closure, I realized that life is often built from the smallest moments. I began noticing things I had long overlooked, the way sunlight fell through my window in the morning, the quiet sound of birds outside, the smell of fresh coffee brewing in my kitchen. These simple pleasures became anchors, reminders that life was still beautiful even after betrayal. I took time to savor them, feeling each moment fully instead of letting it pass unnoticed. I also rekindled my love for music. In the evenings, I would play the piano, a skill I had neglected for years. The notes seemed to speak the words I could not say, expressing sorrow, hope, and joy all at once. Sometimes I would play softly, other times I would let the music fill the entire house. In those moments I felt alive, connected to myself, and free from the shadows of the past. Cooking became another therapy. I experimented with new recipes, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, but always enjoying the process. There was a certain comfort in creating something tangible, nourishing myself in both body and soul. Preparing meals for friends who visited gave me joy too. Their laughter and appreciation reminded me that human connection could be simple, genuine, and uplifting. One afternoon, I took a spontaneous trip to the mountains. I hiked alone, carrying only a small backpack, feeling the weight of the world slowly lift with every step. Standing at the peak, looking out at valleys and rivers below, I felt a profound sense of peace. It was as if the universe was telling me that despite betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, life remained vast, beautiful, and full of possibility. That moment became one of the clearest memories of my recovery, a symbol that I had climbed beyond my own despair. I also found joy in writing letters, not to anyone in particular, but to myself. I wrote about past mistakes, about lessons learned, about hopes and dreams for the future. These letters were a way to document my growth, to remind myself of how far I had come, and to articulate feelings that were too complex to speak aloud. Over time, the letters became a treasured record of my journey, capturing the transformation from a heartbroken man to one filled with hope and purpose. Friendships grew stronger during this time. I realized that when a marriage fails or a love betrays, the true test is in the people who remain by your side. Friends who laughed with me, encouraged me, and listened without judgment became my lifeline. We shared long evenings discussing life, dreams, and even heartbreaks. Through them, I learned that community and support are invaluable, and that love comes in many forms beyond romantic relationships. I began practicing mindfulness and meditation. Sitting quietly, observing my thoughts without judgment, helped me gain clarity and inner peace. I learned to face painful memories without being overwhelmed by them. Instead of allowing betrayal to define my present, I accepted it as part of my story and moved forward with intention and self-respect. Small adventures became my therapy as well. I took weekend trips to nearby towns, exploring local cultures, trying new foods, and meeting people I would have never encountered otherwise. Each journey reminded me that life is vast, full of opportunities for joy, learning, and growth. I discovered the beauty in independence, the freedom to choose my path, to experience the world on my own terms, and to find meaning beyond relationships. I even began mentoring younger people at work, sharing my experiences in a way that was honest but compassionate. I told them about trust, heartbreak, and the importance of resilience, not to scare them, but to prepare them for life's challenges. Seeing them learn and grow gave me a sense of purpose I had never expected. It reminded me that my experiences, no matter how painful, could become lessons for others. As time went on, I embraced self-love fully. I no longer sought validation from anyone, nor did I rely on relationships to define my worth. I invested in my health, hobbies, and friendships. I traveled, explored, learned new skills, and celebrated small achievements. Life became a mosaic of meaningful moments, each one adding depth and color to my existence. Even when I occasionally thought of her, the woman who had betrayed me, I felt neither anger nor despair. I acknowledged the memory without letting it dominate me. I realized that holding on to resentment would only prolong suffering. Forgiveness, even if silent and internal, had liberated me. I was no longer her prisoner, nor the prisoner of past mistakes. I was free. As the years went on, I began to notice how much I had changed, not just outwardly, but inwardly. I was calmer, more patient, and more thoughtful. I no longer reacted impulsively to hurt or betrayal. Instead, I observed, reflected, and responded with intention. My heart, once fragile and vulnerable, had grown stronger. I had learned that resilience is not just enduring pain, but transforming it into wisdom and strength. I found joy in simple routines. Mornings spent walking along quiet streets, afternoons reading in the park, evenings cooking a new recipe or playing music, all became sources of satisfaction and fulfillment. These were not grand achievements, but small victories that reminded me of the beauty of everyday life. Each moment of contentment reinforced the truth that happiness is not found in others, but in nurturing one's own spirit. I also reconnected with old dreams. Travel, writing, and self-expression had always been passions, but now I pursued them with renewed energy. I wrote longer essays and short stories inspired by my experiences, capturing the complexity of human emotions and the journey from heartbreak to healing. Sharing these writings with others became a subtle form of therapy, allowing me to turn pain into something meaningful and lasting. Romance became a possibility again, though cautiously. I learned to approach it with awareness and discernment. My heart was no longer naive, but open to genuine connection built on honesty, mutual respect, and shared values. I realized that past heartbreak did not disqualify me from love. It only prepared me to recognize it when it was real. I also began to cherish solitude in a new way. Time alone was no longer lonely. It was empowering. I learned to enjoy my own company, to reflect deeply, and to connect with my inner self. Meditation and journaling became daily practices, helping me process emotions, set goals, and maintain balance. Solitude was no longer emptiness, it was a source of strength and clarity. Friendships continued to grow, becoming more meaningful than ever. I sought out people who valued honesty, kindness, and growth. I laughed with them, learned from them, and shared experiences that reinforced the beauty of human connection. These relationships reminded me that support comes in many forms, and that community can heal even the deepest wounds. One morning, I woke up and realized something remarkable. I no longer felt defined by betrayal. The pain that had once consumed me had softened into wisdom. I could recall her actions without rage, without despair, and even without bitterness. I had transformed the wound into insight, the heartbreak into resilience. I had reclaimed my life, and with it, my sense of self. Travel became even more meaningful. I explored cities I had dreamed of visiting, from the streets of Paris to the beaches of California. Each journey was an affirmation that life continues beyond loss, and that joy can be found in discovery, experience, and personal growth. I met people from different walks of life, learned from their stories, and felt a profound sense of connection to the larger world. I also began helping others navigate their own challenges. I shared my experiences with people who had faced betrayal or heartbreak, offering guidance without judgment. It was rewarding to see others grow, to witness them reclaim their strength and self-worth. In helping them, I realized that my journey, painful as it had been, had created an opportunity to bring hope and insight to others. Gradually, I embraced life fully again. I allowed myself to dream, to hope, and to pursue goals I had once set aside. I invested in my passions, nurtured relationships, and cherished the small victories that reminded me I was alive and capable of happiness. The house that had once echoed with betrayal now felt warm, inviting, and full of possibility. Eventually, I reached a state of quiet contentment. I understood that life is unpredictable, that love can hurt, and that trust is fragile. But I also knew that healing, resilience, and self-respect are powerful forces. I had faced the worst betrayal I could imagine, survived and emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. Sitting one evening by the window, watching the sunset cast golden light across the city, I reflected on the journey I had traveled. Heartbreak had taught me lessons I could never have learned otherwise. It had forced me to look inward, to cultivate strength, and to discover the beauty of my own spirit. I had learned to trust myself, to cherish life, and to embrace love with clarity and wisdom. And in that moment I realized that the past, painful though it was, had been necessary. Without it, I would not have discovered my own strength. Without it, I would not have learned to live fully, to love wisely, or to appreciate the fragile, beautiful nature of life. The betrayal had been devastating, yes, but it had also been transformative. I had been broken, but I had rebuilt. I had been hurt, but I had healed. I had been lost, but I had found myself. And now I could face the future with confidence, hope, and the knowledge that no matter what life threw my way, I was capable of enduring, growing, and thriving. Life, I realized, is a journey of resilience. Pain may visit, betrayal may come, but the human spirit is unyielding. I had discovered that truth firsthand, and in doing so I had reclaimed not just my life, but my heart, my purpose, and my freedom. This will complete the autobiography. The final stage of my journey was quiet, subtle, but profound. I no longer dwelled on what had been lost or on the betrayal that had once consumed me. Instead, I focused on what I had gained: strength, clarity, resilience, and an understanding of myself that no heartbreak could ever take away. I had learned that life does not end because someone chooses to leave, but begins anew when you reclaim your own path. I began to plan for the future with intention and hope. I dreamed of postponed travels I had made, relationships I could nurture with honesty and respect. I no longer feared loneliness because I had my own company. I no longer feared love because I had learned to recognize its authenticity. Each decision I made now was rooted in self-respect and awareness.